If I had to choose the one contribution to that group that I would consider my most important, it wouldn't be as guitarist or a singer or writer, it would be as someone who could take raw material and fashion it into a sound. Interesting, I think that somewhere in the making of the first Fleetwood Mac album that I was involved with, there was a really strong sense that something special was going on. I was awfully young when I wrote So Afraid. That's a great example of what Fleetwood Mac was in the studio versus on stage, because we got it to the stage and it turned into a pit bull.
Just there to play bass. I'm not there to strut my stuff, as it were, which is very hard to do when you're doing a bass line.
When I think of my tenure with the band, I mean, I would certainly like to think that I was doing the right thing for myself and for everyone else in being a team player.
Stevie tended in those days to keep really quite quiet, because she'd been used to being quiet with Lindsay and looked to him for those creative needs.
The Rumors album really, you know, you talk about the music, but then beyond that, people talk about the success, or they talk about the, quote, musical soap opera. Because John and Christine were breaking up, because Stevie and I were breaking up during the making of that album, that you find a lot of cross conversations going on, and very honest ones. Maybe Rumors was a little more of a surprise, because it's one thing to sell, you know, 2 million albums. It's another thing to sell the most albums that had ever been sold up to that time.
What you hear is what you get, is basically it. I mean, it'd be very nice to go in the studio and go, yeah, let's make about 60 million bucks, and you're right. But it doesn't work like that.
Where do you go from there? Do you try to make Rumors too, which the machinery would dictate that you do? And even if you do try, will you be able to? Probably not. You know, that was a moment, so why try? You go back to what I was doing before Fleetwood Mac, there certainly was more of this kind of musical painting going on, which I had totally let go of. I was interested in reclaiming some of that, because it was, of all the things that might have been given up, that was the one thing which I felt had left a huge space in terms of my musical functioning. I went over to Mix one day and I said, look, we're getting ready to make an album. I don't know how the guys are going to feel about this, but I would like to go do some of my writing / recording on my own at home, and then bring the stuff in and have everyone react to it and work on it, and also then get involved with everyone else's songs. And that was not well received at first, but it was received, and I did do that. It's a very fine line, you know, between being experimental and being accessible. It's not easy at all. It's something which has to be done with a certain amount of finesse. Tusk is actually my favorite album of the Fleetwood Mac involvement, not only because it represents sort of the embarkation on a certain kind of level of thinking about what's important and what isn't, but just the music itself. It's joyful and it's explosive, and it was a moment, certainly for me. But, you know, I sort of overestimated not the public's ability, but maybe their willingness to take such a left turn so quickly. I think if you want to keep an audience going with you over a period of time, you've got to do it gradually. By the time we got to Mirage, in my mind, we were already sort of cut loose from the essence of what we were about, and were sort of, I felt like I was sort of adrift a little bit. The line between my material and the band material by '87 had gotten a little fuzzy. I guess you could say to some degree there are aspects of the Tusk approach in Tango in the Night, even though it's in a different way. It's in a less raw way. You can find certain pieces that definitely are not Fleetwood Mac songs, and you can find certain pieces that definitely are. And there are always going to be some gray in the middle that could go either way, and I think Big Love is probably one of those. Right before Tango in the Night, you know, I was working on what would have been a third solo record. And I hadn't really defined it in my mind that I was near the end at that point with Fleetwood Mac. And looking at a point of leaving, it seemed to me that it was going to be less hurtful for everyone to leave before a tour. It would allow them to get some new people and to break them in on the road, and then when they had to confront the studio again, in a sense, they would already be a unit.